Show of hands, anybody here that going to read our statement of purpose, which pretty much spells out why we're here. Okay? Community Plus statement of purpose. We believe our God-given life and liberty is first lived locally, then works its way outward to the national level. While our nation's founding documents were created to protect that life, liberty, and property, we find ourselves needing to stand together locally for strength and mutual support to preserve the same. Community Plus is a coming together of local people to encourage building strong homes and families, knowing your neighbors, being a good neighbor, promoting an informed and active citizenry, growing a healthy local economy, and being a forum for local connectedness and communication. Community Plus is us voluntarily stepping up, doing our part to keep alive our ability to live our own lives and raise our families freely, each according to his or her conscience before God. Our homes, our sanctuary, our community, our strength. Amen?
Amen.
So, for the newbies, okay, I'm Steve Majors, the moderator. And as I often say, I'm not an unbiased moderator. But largely, this is our forum where we can get together and we can share our ideas, our thoughts, our suggestions. You know, sometimes people like ideas and they come together and do something about it. But the group doesn't do anything for anybody other than provide a forum for us to get together. If anything that happens, it's because you or a bunch of you get an idea that you like and you voluntarily step up and do it. Okay, likewise, nobody's here to convince anybody else of anything. You're each responsible for yourselves, okay? And you're free to disagree with anything and everything, right? But we allow liberty for everybody, whatever they think is a benefit to the community, have the liberty to express what they want to express. So that's kind of the ground rules. I've just kind of moderated, kind of keep a little order, and as I've discovered, to step in the case of excesses. Somebody getting too far off point, or a little too belligerent, or something like that, you know, or something like that. So, but I'm not unbiased because obviously, you've heard me say a lot about how central importance I think the common law is if we're going to preserve, reestablish our republic. And I'm so happy today's speaker is talking on the common law, the very book I've been trying to get people to read for 3 or 4 years. So, and he's here with us today, so we're very excited about that. I'm going to keep the announcements to minimal today. There's a couple afterwards. And most of them are going to be right here on this table if you want to check them afterwards. Like one on clean, grass-fed, local hamburger. Anyway, that's right there. So, what do you think? Are you surprised we've gotten past the inauguration without any more turmoil in the country? I'm not sure the exact quote, but didn't Will Rogers say something about we're never in more danger than when Congress is in session? Okay, well, we got that going on, and at Boise as well. So, but probably next month we'll spend more time with an open forum discussion and stuff like that. If you're interested and have things you want to share or hear people's thoughts on and all. But I don't want to take too much time today for that. So, so we got, and most of you I think know what's going on, but we've got our silent auction going on over here. I think Sandy was just telling you, that is to support our aid for our senator in Boise, Cindy Carlson. Okay, our Idaho Citizen for Good Government came up with this idea of raising enough money, about $10,000, to hire somebody, and she could pick the person because that person is just there to help her do her job in representing us. Okay?
Yeah.
And so we've raised a little over half the money. Where are we at?
2/3.
About 5,500, 6,000.
Now we're at 6,600.
Oh, we're at 6,600. We were shooting for 10,000. Okay, so we're most of the way there, 2/3 of the way there. But that's what this auction is all about. So if you want anything in that silent auction, all the money is going for funding Tate Manley as an aid to Cindy Carlson. So I do have a donation box here just for the room, like we usually do. The expense and the events in the room was a little more this time, but that's there. But really, if you have money, you just burn a hole in your pocket. Between the auction and Brent and his wife Susan and their good friend, I've been saying her name all week, Francine. Okay, they're in the back, and he'll explain what all he has back there, but those are both good causes. If you want to invest in something that's good for our country, our state, our nation, both of those are good outlets. So while you're here. Anything else I need to cover?
Yeah.
What?
When does your silent auction close?
Oh, right.
When
Thank
we get
you.
enough money. No.
Yeah, you don't leave here until we got enough money. We figure we usually end the meeting by 4:30, and we'll give it an extra half hour till 5 o'clock, okay, on the silent auction.
Thank you.
So, right, that's good. I forgot that one. What else am I getting? Oh, well, we'll talk about the LA fires next month. And there's information on the chemtrails and the geoengineering and stuff. We'll talk more about that next month. Is there something else?
Yeah, the February 14th meeting here.
Oh, good one. So ICGG has invited Dorothy Moon to come up. She's the chair of the state GOP, and we want to sit down with her personally and discuss what to do about the rhino problem in the Republican Party. So that's here on Valentine's Day, February 14th, 10 a.m. In case anybody wants to help twist her arm as to what to do about it. So I'm going to read the bio that Susan sent for me. So Brent Winters standing in the back there, and his wife Susan at the table, and Francine with the pretty red hair. They all came over here. So here, let's give you a little picture of the diversity of this guy. So Brent Allen Winters is a farmer, a livestock man, a geologist, a Bible translator, a church elder, a lawyer, a law book writer, and a teacher. He grew up on a farm in southeastern Illinois, Wabash Valley, which, by the way, was pretty close to where I grew up. So we've had an awful lot of commonalities there, talking about things back there. He was an air gunner aboard the carrier USS Coral Sea. He was a dive team member of the U.S. Navy, Diving Unit 1, and a commissioned U.S. Armed Forces chaplain. After military service, while farming and raising livestock, Brent pastored a small church in Wabash Valley. He worked in western states as a mining geologist, later ran for Congress. You didn't win, though, I guess. When you ran for Congress?
Yeah,
Yeah, that was U.S. Congress?
U.S. Congress, yeah.
From Illinois.
Right.
Yeah.
The southern border of 27 counties, from Decatur to Cairo.
Decatur to Cairo, I know where that is. South part of the state. He hosted a daily radio talk show near Terre Haute, Indiana. He has clerked for a state appellate judge, argued before state and federal appellate courts, and tried cases before the jury in both state and federal courts. Internet platforms and radio outlets carry Brent's teaching called A Common Lawyer Comments. So I met him 12, 13 years ago.
12, I think.
Yeah, Sandy and Jay and I went to this weird Patriot gathering the other side of Orofino, and he was one of the speakers, and what he was saying so fascinated me. I bought his book. That's why I've been telling you guys about his book for so long. So we're really privileged, in my view. Well, and Therese has known him for a long time before she moved up here, too.
21 years.
21 years. Anyway, welcome, Brent. Share with us what's on your heart. Okay. I'm going to pass around these 3x5 cards. If you can, because there'll be question time and stuff like that. He doesn't mind interacting with you. I asked him to be sure. But if you want to write your question down to make it easier, so you got it there and then just read it, that will help. That's why I'm going to pass these, go down through the room with the pens. Okay, I'm out of here.
Steve, you want to sit right here? Because Susie's in the back.
The gallery on the side, we don't want to ignore them. Thank you, Steve. And thank you for organizing this and allowing me to come and say a few words. Had a friend in the Gideons, you know, the people that pass around the Bibles, the military services and all. He was from down along the Wabash. His family was the first family, the most well-known family in town. They ran a floral shop. So people thought they were nice people, right? They weren't like that guy up in Chicago. What was his name? They said that his name was O'Bannon, I believe. And when he finally died from gunshot wounds, he ran the floral shop there in a big part of the south side of Chicago. And they said he was the only guy in Chicago that could not only provide the corpses for the funerals, but also the flowers. I think his name was O'Bannon. What a character. But down on the other end, down toward the other end of the state, his parents ran the floral shop in the oldest town in the state, Palestine. When I say these things, Steve knows what I'm talking about, but we were from the next county south from where Steve grew up, and we have something in common, Steve and I, by the way. We discussed this last night. You can't overemphasize it, in my humble opinion. And that is that our common law, the laws of nature, and our Bible, the laws of nature's God, are the two fundamental volumes of law that we as Americans have. These and no others. These and no more. But what Steve and I agreed on was this: that it's more important that the boy that walks behind the plow, quoting William Tyndale, that the boy that walks behind the plow can understand it than it is the professor in the university and the law school. And the professors in the universities and the law schools, professors of law and theology and all that stuff, they often know a lot about the law. But not all of them know the law. And there's a big difference. How big is it? It's so big that Magna Carta, June 15, 1215, says article, they call them articles, they didn't have those words in the Magna Carta. By the way, Magna Carta was drafted by Stephen Langton. Stephen Langton was the man that gave us our chapter divisions to our Bibles. We are a Christian culture. Only a lunatic or somebody would reach back when the sun's shining through the window and just pull a blind and say, that's not true. Oh. It's just the truth. And you're familiar, if you've been in the Patriot community, you've heard the difference between de jure and de facto.
Yeah.
We are a de jure Christian country, and always have been. Not de facto, or no, I'm sorry, I got it backwards, Pastor Campbell. I saw you shake your head, now watch me, will you? I got that just backwards. We are de facto Christian country, not de jure. There's no law that says we're a Christian country, but we sure are. In fact, we're the most Christian country in the history of Adam's race. There's no question. We're talking here about facts. I'm not preaching a sermon, it's just a fact. And once you understand that or accept the truth and the reality of it, then you can operate in this culture and things will work better and more effectively. Well, I'm already deep into the middle of what I'm going to say. I'm going to try to follow some order. I have an assignment here. An assignment. The assignment is to tell or say what I believe is my convictions. I'm giving testimony here. I'm just giving testimony. I'm a witness. What I found, and one of the rules in the courtroom is you never argue with the witness. Never. If you do, you'll lose the jury. They won't like you. You just stay after the witness, and the witness will tell you what he has seen, heard, touched, smelled, or thought, or felt in his guts. That's part of it. He's a fact witness. And I'm just giving the facts as I've found them, and I've been at it for these 2 volumes, The Laws of Nature, unwritten in the nature of creation and the laws of nature of God, written in the Bible. Those have informed our national consciousness more than any nation that's ever existed. What is our common law? Have you asked that question to yourself? I did, a lot. Over 40 years ago, I began to ask that question. And I went through law school, and I never got the answer. I got guidance from one particular man who had been a prosecutor at Nuremberg. He gave me clear guidance. He didn't tell me. He probably knew more about the common law, or as much as anybody living. He was a comparative lawyer. What's a comparative lawyer? Watch me. I'm giving you my testimony. This is what I've discovered to be true. There are only 2 traditions of religion, law, and government in the world. Only 2. How many people have I talked to that have been to university educated, and they've come back and said, well, I took a course on religion, on the various religions in the world. There are 17 fundamental. I say, wait a minute. No, there aren't. There are just 2. There's the true one, and then there's everything else under 1,000, or one other one under 1,000 labels. That's what it boils down to. Mm-hmm. Friends, if you've got in order to have government, you got to have a lawgiver. Mm-hmm. There can't be government without law. Government rests upon law. And the question in life is, all of life, who is your lawgiver? Who is your final arbiter? Arbiter. That means he doesn't have to give any reasons for his decision. Who's your final arbiter of right and wrong? Met a fellow in a gas station, great big guy. He was standing at the counter, bruiser kind of guy. Tattoos all over his hide. Looked mean, ugly, dangerous. And I said, which I say to people often, you got religion? That's my opening question. You got religion? Well, I don't know if you got religion or not. I said, well, who decides for you what's right and wrong? And he was a teddy bear, of course, like a lot of those guys are, and he wanted to talk. And I said, who decides right and wrong for you? He said, well, I don't know, I guess I do. I said, oh, you're your own God, your own lawgiver, your own final arbiter of right and wrong in individual instances from whose decision there is no appeal. Now, that's an important part of the definition of what a God is. He said, I never thought of it that way. I said, well, if you take yourself for your own lawgiver, when you go down, your God goes down, and when your God goes down, you go down. If you take somebody else for your final decider of right and wrong, when they go down, you go down. Napoleon said, I am France, and France is me. The Roman emperor said the same thing. The Pharaoh of Egypt said the same thing. The emperor of Japan in World War II said the same thing. Hitler said the same thing in substance. Oh, they were Christian in Germany, see, so they didn't say it forthrightly. Oh, he's our God, but he was. And when you joined the army, the Nazi army, you didn't take an oath to obey God or obey the law. You took an oath to obey Hitler. Yeah. Well, what is our common law? See, I'm off again. I don't want to hide the ball. Let me read the definition I have. Well, it's just one of the things. You can't say, this is our common law. Now, there are different ways to define things. One of the ways to define things, according to ancient history, and all the people have thought this through more than me, and I've discovered a lot of it to be true. One way to define things is to say what it isn't. To say what it isn't. You know, I learned when I was in biology class, how do you define an insect as separated from an arthropod? A spider. Do you remember that, some of you, from biology? You know, spiders are not insects. Did you learn that, or is it just me? I made a bad grade in the class, but I learned that. You learned it. No, an insect has 3 body parts. Have I got that right? And 6 legs, right? Remember that? Yeah, some of you are shaking. But a spider has 8 legs. Spider is in the phyla related to crawdads and lobsters and critters like that. They got an exoskeleton. Sandy, do you remember that?
I forgot it. But
Your brain's coming back to mine. Okay. Well, our common law is our common law of the land. One of the world's only 2 fundamental traditions of religion, law, and government. Well, that begs the question, what's the other one? The other one is the law of the city. Every government on the face of our green earth and our deserty earth is either one or the other. Every government in the world is governed by either the Roman Code of Justinian in its various forms or the common law tradition. That's it. The Code of Justinian in its various forms. There's the German form, the Code of Bismarck, which Japan adopted. That's why they turned so horrendous, by the way. That's why Germany turned so horrendous. Well, Germans are nice people. But law and government will lead you astray in the sovereignty of God.
Hey, brother, would you mind putting the mic closer to you, brother? We're struggling to hear you.
Well, that's good. Thank
Okay,
you.
get
Thank
closer
you.
to you if you can.
Thank you, Warren.
Okay, you bet.
Well, that means I'm going to stand like this a little more.
Amen.
Is that better? Oh. See, he's used to talking in front of crowds. He's a preacher. So he's helping out his friend up here. Thank you, Warren. Well, our common law of the land is not the law of the city. There are many names for our common law through the history of the world. Common law is a recent moniker. Originally, coming from those Germanic tribes in the north of Europe, it's called the Volk right. The Volk right. You remember the old World War II movies. Germany called itself the Third Reich. See, that's a German word, Germanic word. Volk right. All the Scandinavian tribes, all the Celtic tribes, all those tribes had the same fundamental law we call our common law today, and it had certain characteristics. It was different than all the rest of the world. As I've said before, every country, how many are there? 200 and some? They're all under some form of the Code of Justinian, and those few that aren't, like the Arab nations, Islamic law is like the Code of Justinian. The Code of Justinian in the 6th century. Justinian, the Roman emperor, the most recent expression of the Babylonian law. Our common law is contrary, fundamentally, to that law. What is our common law then? Well, it's contrary to that. That means it's like this. Well, let me remind you, when Stephen Langton, Archbishop of Canterbury, drafted Magna Carta, what did the Pope of Rome do? He declared him bound for hell. Why? Because it mitigated against the Roman Code, the canon civil laws of Europe. Oh, we in America win America. Now, I entitled this, I didn't even tell you that. I'm gonna tell you about myself a little more later. I thought I'd try to get the assignment out of the way. I don't know how good I'm doing, but I entitled this presentation, America's Second Greatest Blessing. America's second greatest blessing. This fellow I told you, the prosecutor from Nuremberg, he was one of my teachers. Funny thing. He was in his early 30s when he was prosecutor. And one of the reasons I liked him so much, and I tried to spend time with him, but he didn't, of course, pay a whole lot of attention to me, but I pestered him. I wanted to hear what he had to say. I wanted to ask him questions. And here he is, one of the preeminent comparative lawyers in the world. A comparative lawyer is a lawyer that contrasts the only two traditions of religion, law, and government. We have our common law, the law of the land, and the civil law, the law of the city, the Code of Justinian, the canon civil laws of Rome. He compares and contrasts them. William Blackstone wrote his commentaries, his 4 volumes, and what he did in that is compared and contrasted the law on the continent of Europe, which is the Roman civil law, and the common law of England. We are inheritors of that common law. It is our second greatest blessing. So I went to this fellow's office, and there was one sound in the English alphabet he could not pronounce. And it was the letter L, as in Lima. Now this is a preeminent lawyer, and he couldn't pronounce the word L. It made me like him even more, because I've never met anybody that didn't have a serious flaw, and he couldn't hide his. But when he said law, it sounded just like Elmer Fudd. He said wall with a W. What happened and how that happened, I don't know, but there was nobody that knew more about the subject than him. Well, I went into his office, and I said, well, now, Prof. Fratcher, his name was William Franklin Fratcher, I said, I need to ask you a question. You know, my hat was in my hand, as it were, so to speak, and I said, you said that our common law is our second greatest blessing as Americans. Well, that begs the question, what's our first greatest blessing? He said, what's our first greatest blessing? We only got 2 choices. You got 2 volumes, the law of the land and what does it say in the Declaration of 76, the laws of nature, comma, and the laws of nature's God. He said the laws of nature are our second greatest blessing. The laws of nature's God are our first, is our first. The Bible. Without the Bible, America wouldn't be what it is. That's not a theological statement, that's just a fact. That's why when I was growing up, we didn't play baseball on Sundays. Little League didn't play. All the stores closed. We observed the Sunday Sabbath because we're a Christian country. That's why the hundreds of thousands of crosses in the national cemeteries are just a sea of white crosses. That's because we're a Christian country. That's why we don't serve process in our Constitution of the United States. It even says we're not to serve process on Sunday. It says that because it's in the terms, our common law, our Constitution. Our Constitution is a brief of common law government. It doesn't describe anything. It doesn't explain anything. It doesn't have to. It didn't have to. Americans at that time understood their common law tradition. And they understood it was a Christian tradition. They identified themselves as Christian, and even the ones that wouldn't darken the door of the church dare not blaspheme the Bible or Jesus Christ. Again, this is just historic fact. And it was that way when I grew up too. I used to tell people, they say, why are you a Christian? And I said, well, I was drugged into it. You were drugged into it? What do you? Well, yeah, my dad drugged me to church 3 times a week. Get drugged into church. Sunday morning, Sunday evening, Wednesday evening prayer meeting, Holy Week, and we had revival and communion. If you don't like me, if you don't like my personality, can you imagine how much worse it would have been if I went to church a little? I mean, yeah. Well, that was the world I lived in. That's just the way it is. And by the way, it was that way in most places at that time. Can't argue with it. Clearly, America is the most powerful engine of wealth and prosperity that Adam's race has ever known, ever. There's nothing that even competes to what we are. No country in the history of mankind has taken the Bible and said, we're going to go with the idea that every man needs to decide for himself. Take the book and come to his conclusions. We don't depend upon a priesthood. We don't depend upon some holy prophet someplace. No. When you stand before God himself, we said, this is back to history, when you stand before God, you won't be able to say, well, so-and-so told me, the priest told me, the preacher told me, the Supreme Court told me, the professor told me. No. But what conclusion did you come to? This is a non-delegable responsibility that God puts upon the head of every person. Well, that's what they said. Well, our common law supports that idea. Well, I'm not so naive as to think that everybody in America is Christian. That'd be silly, wouldn't it? I mean, most people in churches probably aren't Christian for all I know. I've been to a lot of churches. The devil works hard there. He's not down at the local tavern or the whorehouse. He's at the church. And false doctrine is his greatest tool. Well, you do what you want. I'm not trying to persuade you to do anything or think anything. I'm telling you what I have discovered. That's my job. That's what I was asked to do. What is our common law? Our common law is the common law of the land. Law of the land, not the law of the city. Have you noticed in America the cityfication? Have you noticed the division politically in this country? Yeah, well, it's never been any different. It's always been the city versus the rural areas. From the beginning of our country forward, we're just seeing more of it. And it's not been any different since the settling of the city of Babylon in Genesis chapter 11 under Nimrod. The law of the land, that's where the law of the city was first organized in sophisticated form, at Babylon. But in modern times, it has taken on the Code of Justinian and propagated throughout the world that way. Can you hear me over here? Good. Propagated throughout the world as the Code of Justinian. Do you know, just things I've discovered is, the Code of Justinian was written in Greek. He was a Roman era, and Latin, and Greek. Nobody in the common law world, and the common law world is primarily the English-speaking world. What the common law world is England and all of her former colonies and colonies. That's what common law countries are. There are only 5 major common law countries in the world. The United States, England, of course, United States, Ireland, I include that for Great Britain, Canada, New Zealand, Australia, and then a lot of other little places like former British Honduras, Belize, Nevis. There's one country colonized from America that's a common law country. Not anymore, it was. Recently that's changed. And that was Liberia in Africa. Liberia was a plan by the government of the United States to remove all the persons of African descent and colonize them back in Africa. And when they did that, they took our common law with them. Where Steve and I are from, the statute says there, I know you probably haven't looked this up, I happen to. The statute says, if anything comes up before our courts that our courts have not seen before, and there's no statute to cover it, the courts are directed to repair to the common laws that stood in the 4th year of James I. That's what it says. Not used that often, but it's there. Why is that? Because the 4th year of James I was the first permanent colony in America, 1607. And with that colony and that charter came all the land where Steve and I are from. And by the way, that's why we went to war with Britain. Fundamentally, it's right in the Declaration of 76. Accusing the king and the parliament, his cronies, of passing a law called the Quebec Act that extended the boundary of Quebec from north of the Great Lakes to the Ohio River. Why? Because the French-speaking people there wanted their law of the city back. You see, the religion dictated that. Religion always dictates government, always. Show me the fundamental form of government of the dominant religious institution of a country, and I will show you the fundamental government of that country. I'm not the first one to say that. A lot of fellows have said that, a lot of comparative lawyers. I will show you the government of that country. Is it any accident that all of South America and Mexico were under dictatorships? No, in their heart of hearts, in their deepest religious convictions, they want a dictator, and in their religion, it's by law there, they want it, and that's what they've got. Again, coming back to Palestine, that fellow that had the floral shop, there was a couple of brothers lived there. This little American folklore that gets into the Comanche Nation. You know, the Comanche, they weren't nice people. Once they got horses, they got real nasty. Before they got horses, all the other tribes were dominating them. And the Comanche aren't big folk, they're small folk. But once they got horseback, then they ran the show in the Midwest. They were tough, but they were mean, dirty, rotten, and low, too. And the Texans, the Texicans, were invited to come down there, those two brothers, and from Palestine along the Wabash River. They packed up their families and went to Texas at the invitation of the emperor, or the Mexican government. They couldn't get the Mexicans to go up there because the Comanche hated the Mexicans and they were slaughtering them. So they tried to get the Americans to come in. Because they knew if they didn't get somebody to come in there, they were going to lose the territory. Well, the Parker brothers were a couple of hard-shelled Baptists from down there along the river. You've heard Baptist, but you probably haven't heard of hard-shelled Baptist. They're a tough bunch too. Abe Lincoln was raised hard-shelled Baptist. That's fact, down in southern Indiana. How many other famous people have been hard-shelled Baptists? A hard-shelled Baptist, I know you're wondering what they are, so I'll take it real quick. They're double predestinarians. They believe that God has predestined men to heaven, certain men and women, and certain other men and women to hell. And they don't know who, of course, but they believe it to be true, and they operate that way, and they don't believe in telling anybody the gospel. I had a shirt-tailed cousin who was a hard-shelled Baptist. Used to go to church with her. Nice lady. But I learned a lot. Well, anyway, they were hard-shelled Baptists, and the Mexican government wouldn't let a Protestant church be formed in Mexico, and that was Texas at that time. Well, these fellows outwitted them. They formed their church in Palestine and moved it down there. So they had their Baptist church down there in Texas, and they built a fort called Fort Parker, because their names were Parker. They hadn't been there very long, and all of a sudden they looked out, and their reports were there were about 600 Comanches out in front of the fort in East Texas. Wanted to parlay. Well, they did. It didn't last long, though, and before long they killed everybody. There weren't many men there. They killed all of them. And some of the women, and then they took the girls, and one of them was Cynthia Ann Parker. John Wayne's most famous movie was The Searchers, and that was about Cynthia Ann Parker. Cynthia Ann Parker, then, they kept her a long time, and she bore a lot of children for one fellow, I forget his name. And one of her children, of course they were half-breed children, one of them was named Quanah. And he took his mother's last name, Parker. And he took his mother's religion, which was Christianity. And as he got older, he developed it, and it became the dominant religion on all the reservations in North America, even up into Canada, and still is. 300,000 adherents. Somebody asked if Quanah Parker was quite a nasty man against white folk too, even though he was white, but he got the white boys back. He became a banker in Lawton, Oklahoma. He skinned them 17 ways from Sunday, taking money on interest. But somebody asked Quanah one time, said, what's the difference between your religion and white man's Christianity? He said, well, it's a pretty big difference. He said, when the white man goes to church, he talks about Jesus. When we go to church, we talk to Jesus. We're a Christian nation, friends. I mean, even the red men. I knew a fellow once, I was in California, his name was Tom Claus. He was a Mohawk. And he was trying to spread Christianity. Tom Claus, C-L-A-U-S-E, I believe it's a German word, K-L, like Santa Claus, K-L-A-A-S is the way the Germanic people would spell it. But he said, I'm proud to be an Indian by race. I'm prouder to be a sinner saved by grace. That was his line. Well, America's a Christian nation. And common law is a Christian tradition. Well, Sam, I was gonna tell you about Sam down in Palestine, the fellow that his family owned a floral shop, he was in the Gideons. And he said, Brent, when you stand up to speak, just remember a couple of things. Stand up, button up, speak up, and shut up. I got them all down except for shutting up. Dad said to me one time, I was arguing with him, friendly of course. We were rotating bores. We had to rotate bore hogs. We had to undo the gates. He used to baling wire all our gates. And he said, Brent, if you don't shut up, you're going to sunburn your tongue. Okay, what is the common law? What is the world's other fundamental tradition of religion, law, and government? The world's other fundamental tradition of religion, law, and government. You switched places.
You want me to
Threw me
extend
off.
that? You want me to extend that?
Yeah, well, yeah. You know, I guess I can do it right here, maybe, is that it?
Well, not too sure.
Oh, yeah. Thank you so much. Yeah, that helped. The world's other fundamental tradition of religion, law, and government is the civil canon law of the city. We noticed, again, that the political division in America is rural versus the city. 20% of America's vote by county goes to the, in geographic area, goes to one candidate, and 80% of the geographic area of America goes to the other candidate. I was talking to a girl, went to school with my boys down at Texas A&M. She's from communist China. She told me they're building cities complete with Walmarts and McDonald's, trying to persuade people to come into the cities and get off the land. This isn't called the law of the land for nothing. We're talking about what is the law? What is the common law? It is the law of the land. What does that mean? Well, that's the ablative of source in the Latin tongue from Magna Carta. It means land law. Land law. The law of the city is city law. The city law comes fundamentally. Well, let me just go back and maybe describe it a little bit. You know, there were two men, they say, founded Rome. Romulus and Remus. A couple of brothers. Tradition is they were suckled by a she-wolf. A couple of tough boys. Well, they founded the city of Rome on top of another city there that was defunct called Saturnia on those 7 hills. And Saturnia was devoted to the worship of the heavenly body Saturn. You don't worship the true God, the creator of all things. You will worship some part of creation. I didn't say that, Paul the Apostle said that. Do you believe it? I don't know, look around. In India, they worship cattle, and they eat their manure, and they put it in fancy dishes. That's what paganism will lead you to. That's been my observation. Christianity is a good deal, friends. No, you think I'm kidding? Go to the internet and look at the recipes they have to cook cattle manure in India and eat it. Oh, that's just the tip of the iceberg. America is a wonderful place because of Christianity. That's the fact of the matter. You may not believe it's true, but even if you don't, you live in a Christian culture. It's just a fact. Well, talking about the law of the city, what are the fundamental differences between the law of the land and the law of the city? How do you tell? Our common law of the land recognizes 2 self-evident facts. 2 self-evident facts. What are they? You've heard them. The civil law does not recognize these 2 self-evident facts. The 2 self-evident facts are, well, Tom Jefferson in the Declaration cites them. Tom Jefferson said there were 3 men that were the greatest mortals that ever lived. Had pictures there at Monticello on his wall. Who were those 3 men? Significantly, one of them was John Locke. John Locke. John Locke was the son, John Locke was a Puritan, son of a Puritan common lawyer. Common lawyer? Only 2 kind of lawyers in the world. Only 2 traditions of religion, law, and government, and only 2 kind of lawyers. There are lawyers of the law of the land and lawyers of the law of the city. That's it. Every lawyer in America is a lawyer of the law of the land, whether he understands it or not, and forces are afoot in our law schools to get rid of that distinction as rapidly as possible.
The only place comparative law is taught by mandatory in the law schools in America that I know of is Louisiana. And Louisiana is the only state that's a non-common law jurisdiction. For the same reason, Quebec is not a common law jurisdiction, because of the French-speaking people there and their religion. And Louisiana, same way. Did you know that in Louisiana, they never even had a jury trial for murder cases until after 1968? It's fact. See, the jury is a common law feature. It does not exist in the rest of the world. 12 men. Why 12 men? Where'd that come from? Well, that fellow in Australia said he went to jury duty. What was his name? Very famous. So famous I can't remember his name. I don't know, he was a pretty smart guy. He said he went to jury duty, and he said, why is it necessary we have a jury? Why don't they ask the experts? Why do they just grab 12 men off the street and ask them who lives or dies in a murder case? Why do we do that in America? The French have always said we're insane to do that. Why don't we ask the experts? We ask the experts about everything else. If we want to catalog a library, we go find an expert. If we want to find a new galaxy, we go find the experts. But if we want to know who lives or dies in a murder case, we just grab 12 people standing around. I've been on trials where we ran out of jury pool in a small town. The judge said, well, I've never done this before, but I'm going to send a sheriff out here on the courthouse square so we can grab up some folks to bring in here. To do what? To decide whether or not we're going to take the life, liberty, or property of this fellow over here, or some combination thereof, or not. And they don't even want to be there. They'd rather be someplace else. That's what makes the jury work, by the way. They're ticked off by the time they get there. They're ready to lay blame someplace, and that's what they're looking for. The jury, now I speak as a man that's been sprung by the jury in a criminal case in federal court. Boy, do I understand things I didn't used to understand. They used to defend people before the jury. I asked my lawyer, a buddy of mine, we'd done a case or two together. He defended me. I had to give up everything I'd earned in that one case. Had a fellow there with a piece of farm machinery worth about $500,000. It claimed to incorporate dry fertilizer with herbicide all in one patch. You see, that saved you a lot of money. Had big booms going out, spraying. And we called in this expert witness from West Point, the military academy. And he was teaching at Terre Haute at Rose-Hulman, a feeder school to the U.S. Army Officer Corps, an engineering school. By the way, it's called Rose-Hulman. Now, some of you have heard of Clabber Girl Baking Powder. Have you?
Yeah.
Clabber Girl Baking Powder Company, owned by the Hulman family. You remember the Indianapolis 500? And that fella come on there right when they got ready to, after the time trials, they got ready to start the race, and he'd say, "Gentlemen, start your engines." You don't remember that? Maybe you're a fan. You do. That was Tony Holman, owner of Clabber Girl Baking Powder Company. He owned the Indianapolis 500. He owned the third downtown Indianapolis. He owned half of, or most of Terre Haute downtown. And you didn't spit on the sidewalk in Terre Haute unless Tony Holman said it was okay. Now that's not an exaggeration. It got out of hand. But we brought in this guy from what? People say to Terre Haute. Where's Terre Haute? And I say, well, you remember the Indiana State Bird, don't you? This crowd's old enough to remember the Indiana State Bird. Indiana got a new state bird. His name was Larry. Remember Larry? Yeah, Larry Bird. They called him the new state bird. Well, he played ball at Terre Haute. That's where Clabber Girl Baking Powder Company was. Well, coming back to, this witness, this expert witness, Voltaire said there are three kinds of witnesses, expert witnesses. There are liars, damnable liars, and then expert witnesses. Gets worse as it goes. We had one in there on the other side, and he was obviously a liar. They paid him to say what he was going to say. We had this fellow from West Point, and he testified about projectile motion. Projectile motion. when the fertilizer was going through those booms, that's projectiles being forced through those booms and it wouldn't squirt, it would clog up was the problem. And it did not work as advertised. My client wanted his money back, $500,000. He wasn't asking for anything more. He ruined a lot of people's crops. Ruined 40 acres in my dad's bean field back at that time. Well, he testified and had charts and graphs and all. I got to talking to him. He said, the Army is developing a new kind of artillery. Now I'm making a point about law here. I'm not just telling the story. A new kind of artillery, and this artillery, every time you fire a round through this artillery, it's made of an alloy that causes the artillery barrel to get stronger and not weaker. Yeah, that's what I said. You kidding me? Well, I learned, we'd go out and bust up concrete and rocks with sledgehammers when I was a teenager. And, oh boy, I'd come down on them hard. I was 16 or so. I thought I could muscle my way through curtain or anything. I had an 8-pound sledge. Go wham! I'd come down those rocks over and over, and they'd never break. My dad'd be over there just gently, 12-pound sledge, but and all of a sudden he'd hit it after a few times and it just exploded into 100,000 different pieces. I said, how do you do that? He said, well, you're not doing it right. Why not hold my mouth right? He said, no. You've got to understand strength of materials. Everything, if you tap it enough or hit it enough in the same place, it will eventually disintegrate. But you've got to hit it in the same place every time, and you don't have to hit it hard. Somebody's shaking their head. Did you know that? It's an engineering principle. People know it that work in engineering. And they figure on things like that when they're building buildings and bridges and all those kind of things. And I found it to be true. That's why the dentist, I did the dentist office and kicked back, waiting for him to shoot me up with Novocaine. He's got all these signs all over the ceiling. And one of them said something about chewing ice. If you chew ice and you have a false tooth or a cap, eventually it will break because of that principle. Now, your teeth are alive. Your live teeth won't so much. But anyway, this fellow said, and every time when you fire it, it strengthens, and we're working on that. That is the way our common law is. Our common law is fundamentally an adversarial tradition. Adversarial. That means we go into court and we fight. The law of the city, the rest of the world, is inquisitorial. You've heard of the Spanish Inquisition. You've heard of it. Well, that's where they torture people to get them to say what they want them to say. Torture is the fundamental truth-gathering tool, along with the confessional. Torture is the fundamental truth-gathering tool of the law of the city. What is the fundamental truth-gathering tool of the law of the land, our common law? Cross-examination. Cross-examination. What is the fundamental guarantee of truth in our courts? The oath. The oath. Do office holders take an oath? Does it mean anything? No. Is an oath a guarantee of truth? Of course not. Of course not. Why? Because men are fundamentally liars, that's why. Oh yeah, you got it in you. You got it in you just like the rest of us. And don't tell me you've never told a white lie. Or a black one. Well, that's human nature. We're tainted with imperfection and weakness, and we're wound up and bound up in our own whims and difficulties. And put a man in power, and it exacerbates it. Who was it? Acton? Acton. Lord Dalberg Emmerich Acton said, power corrupts. Power does not corrupt, my friends. Why did he say that? Because his theological doctrine was Roman. He was a Romanist. And his theological doctrine is that man is not corrupt. He's a blank slate. So he said power corrupts. I would say, my position is, my conclusion is, no, power doesn't corrupt. Power exacerbates the weakness of the human heart. It excites it. And Acton was right about this. He said there's no doctrine more monstrous than the doctrine that says that the office sanctifies the man. The office, I got a badge on, shut up and do what I say. I got a badge on, I get to beat people up. Well, not all officers are that way, but it does happen, doesn't it? Now, that's called flying a false flag, claiming authority for something you don't have. That's called a violation of the third commandment. Do not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain. What does that mean? That means don't take the authority of God himself for a false purpose. That's what that means. Don't be flying a false flag and doing something you don't have authority to do. The President of the United States has only so much authority. I think it's getting hot in here. Or, of course, I'm exercised more than you. I hope you aren't hot. We've been at this for 1 hour and 6 minutes. Yeah, that's right. And I don't want to go too long. I do want to give you a sense of what our common law is. Bottom line, let me see if I can get a summation statement here, and then we'll shift gears. Oh, the two self-evident, I got to do this. Self-evident fundamental facts. First, the Creator created all men equal. That's what it says. And second, that in so doing, the Creator has endowed each and every man with certain unalienable rights, among which are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. 3 things there. It says among these, but the truth is, there isn't anything else. Can you think of something you have in your life other than life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness? You say, well, I got property. Why did he say property? Your life is your property. Jefferson was right when he said, our property, we have property in our rights, and we have rights in our property. Like ice and water, 2 forms of the same thing. At common law, we say if you've got a piece of land, what you really got is a bundle of rights to use it a certain way. That's what you got. That's what ownership is. Oh, life, that's easy, you know what that is. To the degree you lose life, you lose liberty, and you lose the enjoyment of property, and which is the pursuit of happiness. Pursuit of happiness is more fundamental than property, and I'll get to that in just a minute, and then we'll wrap it up. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. These are self-evident. All men are created equal. What does that mean? That means that you come into life naked, with nothing. Every one of you. And me, we're equal. And we have equal dignity before our Maker. One thing I learned in politics, when I was running for office, I'd be on the street, I'd meet people, they didn't want to talk to me. They would come at me hard and fast, and they'd accost me. Sometimes their eyes were red. Their nose was red. Their teeth were green. And they had an aromatic air about them. But listen, once they started talking about religion and politics, you can't separate the two. They knew exactly what they were talking about. And I discovered, not to judge a book by its cover, men are smart. They think things through. People aren't stupid, like my mother-in-law used to say. People aren't stupid. They may look it, they may act it, but they aren't. People are incredibly intelligent creatures. Horses are born to run. Birds are born to fly. Beasts of prey are born to ferocity. Hounds are born to hunt. Men, I don't care what else they do. They think. You don't have to teach them how to think. Not at all. I looked out the back door one time and I had this 40-pound rooster, a legger, big legger. We got him out off the branch of the creek, down the creek. It was flooded, and the branch was down in the water by the bridge, and it was sucking it. This young rooster was sitting on the branch, and it's sucking down the water. We wanted to get him out of there, and my brother climbed out on the iron bridge and had a long pole. We finally got him up to the house and got him up in shape, and once we got him up there, you know, it's like they say, you buy a dog, you feed him for a month, and he thinks you're a god. You buy a cat and feed him for a month, and he thinks he's God. That's the way this rooster was. And I looked out the back door, and he had my little brother down under the clothesline, and he was working him over. My little brother didn't have a shirt on, and he was ripping up his back pretty lively. I've still got his furs, by the way. They're about that long. Yeah. My mother saw it. Well, that's different than me seeing it, see? Yeah. She came out the kitchen door in the back with one of those sweet brooms, you know, made out of broom corn, big handle, and she brought it down on the rooster so hard that it broke that big handle. It wasn't one of those lightweight ones. She broke it. I said, she killed him. I went out and looked. He didn't move. Then later that day, he somehow got up and staggered over to the barn. I said, well, that'll stop that. He won't be jumping me when I come out in the morning anymore to do the feeding. Came out the next morning, here he comes. I heard him behind me, running at me, getting ready to work me over. Why? You could have beaten a mud hole in that rooster and turned around and beat the mud hole dry. And you aren't going to change the character of the rooster. He's a fighter. That's all he knows how to do. God made him to do that. God made you to think. But here's the problem. Here's the problem. What's the foundation of the law of the city? Listen to me. I'm going to end with this. If you don't get anything else, get this. The foundation of the law of the city is reason. What's the foundation of the law of the land? Fact. Fact. We don't have lawsuits in America. We have fact suits. We don't ask the jury to tell us what the law is. Anybody done jury duty here? Did they ask you to tell them what the law was? No. What did they ask you to tell them? What happened? Who done it? How do you do it? Why do you do it? Give us the facts. Common law is founded on fact, not on reason. All of the scholastic world, all of the Roman law world is founded upon reason. The great scholastic doctors of the Middle Ages and all that baloney. That's silliness, friends. Utter silliness. Because I don't care if you can explain the fact. Fact is fact. I went to school, studied evolution, like a lot of people do at university. It's a required course. They're seminaries of Satan. They're teaching evolution. That's what they told me. Well, I listened to the guy talk. He was one of the preeminent men, probably good friends with that fellow over there, Indiana, or University of Indiana, Terre Haute, I forget his name, promoting evolution. And I saw flaws in it. And I went to this fellow one time, and I don't know why we got to talking about it. And I was telling him the story about when we came back one evening from farming, and we came up to the bridge, and it was fall. The snow had not flown yet, but I saw something kind of golden in the brush by the bridge as we came up. I stopped, tractor, got off, pulled the limbs back, and there were three lobes of honeycomb. Huge. One, another one on top, another one on top. Well, we found it was hidden. We smoked the bees, we harvested the honey before our neighbors found it. Well, I told this professor about it. He said that didn't happen. I won't hurt my feelings, I'm just a young guy, he's a professor. I said, what do you mean it didn't happen? What are you saying? He said, that can't happen. Bees will never build out of the open like that on them. He's a doctorate degree biologist. I said, well, I saw it. We harvested the honey. Didn't happen. I said, I got a little bit incensed. I said that I could bring my father and my brothers and my granddad in here. They saw it too, and it happened. He said, no, it didn't happen. He couldn't explain it. He was educated in such stuff. I couldn't explain it. I didn't have to. I had the evidence. We don't ask the jury to understand all that. We ask them to tell us what happened. Most of the Bible, my friends, let me ask a question. And this is the fundamental law of our land, is the laws of nature, and the laws of nature's God, according to our fundamental documents. And it's true, I see it in history in America. Who wrote more of the New Testament than any other writer? I said the same thing. It's not true. He wrote more books, and you knew that, right? But Luke wrote more of the New Testament than any other writer. And Luke wrote 2 books. Acts, more pages than any other writer. Luke does not render an opinion on anything. He doesn't teach any doctrine. What does he do? He just gives us facts. I mean, cold, hard facts. It even says at the beginning of those books that he is reporting to an official of the Roman government. What happened? what was said and what was done. He doesn't vouch for the rightness of the lawfulness of what was said or done. I find it fascinating people take doctrine out of the book of Acts. No, that's the book of evidence more than doctrine, friends. Romans is not doctrine. But that's a book about evidence. Fact. And it's evidence that was witnessed, passes all the rules of common law evidence. Our common law is founded upon fact, not upon reason. When you hear somebody, and this has been my experience, hear somebody says, well, we need to be more critical thinkers. Run for your life. No, that is the evil empire talking, friends. You say, why, Brent? Well, it's like Martin Luther said, logic is a whore. Logic is a whore. It'll do anything you want it to do. And if somebody is stressing logic, I'm quoting Merriman, Professor Merriman from Bolt Hall in Berkeley. At the law school, he was right. He was a comparative lawyer. He said where reason is stressed, facts have a way of receding from consideration. That's fact, friends. There's fact. Just a fact of the matter. Remember Sergeant Friday? What do you say?
Just the facts.
Just the facts, man. Just the facts. You go to court. What do you want? You want just the facts. Listen, men will think. You think all day, every day. You don't have to worry about that. Horses are born to run. Birds are born to fly. Beasts of prey are born to ferocity. Animals are born to hunt. And men are born to think. And you can't stop thinking. You have to be trained to think. Now, this has been my experience. I know a lot of men that have never been educated in anything. And they could outthink me. Easy. My father's one of them. And he said, Brent, the problem with you is you're not putting it together. And he explained it to me. Well, that's, I'm going to tell you a lot of things, but I can't get to it all, and I think that's enough. Except I did tell Steve that if people wanted to ask questions, just to hear what I might say, I'm glad to respond as best as I understand things. Is this a good time to do that? Sure. Okay. You're giving me the go-ahead?
Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead. All right, so I'll do that. If you have comments or questions, thank you for your attention. Yes, Sandy.
Anna Von Reitz claims that the word law is an acronym for land, air, and water. What do you have to say to that?
The word law is a Danish word. See, first the Iberians came to Britain. The Iberians. They were the first ones there. And then the Celts came and tried to exterminate all the Iberians. Drove them to the extremities of the islands, and some of them went to Ireland. The Celts, the Scots, the Picts, the Cornish people. And then the Anglo-Saxons came. First enraged, they were a piratical people, and then every time they come and rob and rape and steal and plunder, they realized that we got to go further inland. We took everything along the coast. And pretty soon they had a policy of extermination of the Celts. And they tried to kill all of them. Well, these are brutal people. All of them. As William Blackstone says, they're piratical. That's your ancestors. Well, then, after the Anglo-Saxons took over, then the Normans, who had settled and conquered a third of France, they invaded in 1066 and had a policy of extermination of all the Anglo-Saxons. But before that, and they still sat on the throne, the Normans. Charlie's a Norman. But before the Normans came, the Danes invaded. The Danish, those are truly the ones that the moniker Viking is attached to. But they're all the same. They're all pirates, and plunderers, and murderers, and rapists. So the Danes came and they conquered the island. And they brought with them a lot of words. Like rug, R-U-G, and law. The Germanic people were rough people. They lived in a rough environment, and their speech was like the Hebrews. It was very rough. And so they had a lot of guttural words. And law is one of those words. Law. Sometimes it's related to the word log, L-O-G. If I say to you, if you've heard it said, that is water logged, L-O-G. You've heard that. That means it's heavy. it's hard to move. A log is something that lays in the woods and it's hard to move. Well, that's what law is. It doesn't move. And it doesn't change. Law, common law, is the way, here's a good definition. It's the way things are. And they ain't going to change. That's a law. And when God speaks, we believe that what he says is and is not going to change. I mean, if you're a Christian man and you understand Christianity. And by the way, that's one of the reasons why the Anglo-Saxons and the Danes, those tribes up there in the north became Christian. They worshiped a God, whose name we still have in the English tongue. And the name of the God was Veered. Veered. You ever hear people say, man, that's weird? Weird. That means it's a fact, or I can't explain it. See, they understood that concept, and their God was Veered. And they said, the pronouncements of Veered cannot be changed. This is from Beowulf. The pronouncements of Veered cannot be changed unless you doty be. Doty. That's an old word we forgot to do. That means you're persistent. Well, when they found out who doty be was, Jesus the Christ, they latched on to that real quick because they understood from their pagan religion and the providence of God who the doty one was. See? Now that's the reading. I'm giving you the testimony of what I read from those early Anglo-Saxon kings. They said things like that. And they accepted the Bible, and Beowulf is the earliest writings we have of them talking about the Bible. Fascinating history that we have as an English-speaking people. And it's not a racial thing, it's our culture. I don't care who you are. I don't care who your ancestors are. If you live in America, you inherit this common law culture. We're the most common law country in the world. We are more English now than the English. Oh yeah, and common comparative lawyers have said that for a number of years. They have abandoned the grand jury. That's part of our common law tradition. They only have jury trials in England and Canada in criminal cases. What does our Constitution say? It says, it's Article Amendment 7, that trial by jury shall remain if there's at least $20 in issue. Well, of course, $20 isn't $20 anymore. We have allowed the powers that be, the bankers, to hijack the government. People say the Federal Reserve Bank is neither federal nor does it have any reserves. I heard that all my life. I found out, I'm fully convinced it's not true. No. The Federal Reserve Bank runs the U.S. government. They are federal de facto. De facto, they're running things. And ever since the income tax came in, Judge Borks was confronted with that question once in public, and he said, yeah, I get it. I see exactly what you're saying. This is against the laws. And our law is common law, and our Constitution is a common law brief of government. It explains nothing. It states the common law. Chief Justice Taft made the comment once. He said, all the words and phrases of our Constitution of the United States are couched in our common law. If you don't understand our common law or know something about it, it's a meaningless document. It's an empty bladder. It's a dispirited skeleton of bones. Why is it like the Bible? Who was it? Mark Twain said, a classic book is a book that everyone says you should read, and no one has ever read. Well, let's consider the Bible. How many people will swear they believe the Bible and they couldn't recite the 66 books or the 10 Commandments in order? Don't say if you can or not. I'm just saying, friends. Pound the Constitution, pound the table, quote pathos and bathos and blasphemy about, I believe in the Constitution, I believe in the Bible. Why is it people don't know the Constitution? I'll tell you why. My conclusion, again, my testimony. Because it is a dry and dispirited skeleton of words without our common law. Once the principles of the common law start to come through to you, I'll try to talk about a few fundamentals here. Then you say, oh, separation of powers. Co-equal branches of government. That's a feature of our common law that does not exist in Europe. It doesn't. I know. Separate, co-equal. DJ Trump. I heard a federal court, and right after I say this, I'm going to ask you to talk. Federal court, somewhere in the Northwest here, are going against his policies on immigration. And and he said, the court said, well, we got to stop all this. Does DJ Trump have to obey the Supreme Court of the United States? What's your opinion? What do you think? See you. Thank you. No, DJ Trump has no duty to obey the pronouncements of the Supreme Court. No place in our law, any place in the Constitution or our law, does that say that. The Supreme Court is not bound to obey the orders of the President of the United States. The Congress is not bound to obey either one of them. The same thing's true in the government of Idaho. It's a common law government. The governor doesn't run the state. The legislature doesn't run the state. And the courts do not have the final word. They just deliver opinions. Well, then who's running the blasted government? Yeah, who's running it? Remember that movie? I haven't forgot you. Remember that movie, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly?
Yeah.
Remember that gun battle at the end? Yeah. Three-way, right?
Yeah.
It was called a three-way what? That's
Standoff.
Mexican standoff. Where that came from, I don't know, but a three-way gun battle is called a three-way Mexican standoff. That's our American government. That is common law government. It came from England. They fought a bloody civil war over there. And by the way, Warren, that book you told me about the prosecutor of the king, it's just all about common law. I mean, it's all about Parliament having a standoff with the king. They went to war. 80,000 Englishmen died in a country of only about 5 million people. And then they stood down. The result? Parliament is now sovereign in England. Is our Parliament, Congress, sovereign here? Is the President sovereign? How about the Supreme Court? Oh, no. They want you to believe it. It's not true. Who's sovereign in America? The people? God's sovereign. That's easy. And that's right, of course. He's the final court of last resort in all of creation. But down here on land in a common law country, who is the final court of last resort in individual instances from whose decision there is no appeal?
The jury.
The jury! You guys know what I'm talking to a crowd that's been thinking about this. I realize that. I hope I said something that enlightened you or encouraged you. And I'm going to quit now, and you're going to have to make a comment or ask a question or something.
Yes, I wanted to ask you a question. Something we're dealing with here concerning our state constitution. And what you just said may really go into this. In the Idaho Constitution, Article 1, the Declaration of Rights, Section 20, it says no property qualification required of electors, and then it says exceptions. No property qualification shall ever be required for any person to vote or hold office except in school elections or elections creating indebtedness or in irrigation district elections, as to which last named elections the legislature may restrict the voters to landowners. And we are fighting this issue right now, and basically from the AG's office on down through our legislatures, the response, most recent response is we just need to change the Constitution and take those exemptions out.
Okay, so what's your position?
Well, my position is that they're saying that because the Supreme Court in the state and at the federal level have ruled against this, but the cases weren't the same, they're saying that our Constitution is unconstitutional. And I'm saying they're ridiculous. That's my position, is that they're ridiculous.
What do you want them to do?
Well, I want the legislature to invoke the exceptions and not allow people who don't own property to vote to tax people that do.
You want for irrigation districts, you think you ought to be a property owner that has a stake?
For school levies, people that don't own property can vote to tax the other people in the district, even though they pay no tax, or have no obligation to pay the tax.
Okay, and you think that's a good idea?
Well, I think it's wrong that they can vote.
Okay. So your question would be, what my opinion of that is?
Yeah.
I figured it. I speak from a position now, I'm just always thinking about our common law tradition. Our common law tradition is not a law of do's or don'ts. Our common law tradition does not include due process. It is due process. I can prove that over and over and over again. The courts don't even get it. Due process is the process that is due and owing to all concerned. Our common law stresses process. It does not stress the outcome. Just like in Deuteronomy 17, and keep in mind, I don't know that I said this, our common law does not arise from the Bible. Our common law does not arise from the Bible. Our common law arises from the same source as the Bible. Our common law arises from creation. Our common law is what we observe the way it is, and it ain't going to change, the relationships between things and things, things and men, and men and men. And we observe. It's unwritten. It's lex non scripta, as Blackstone says. But the outcome standards are not process. Do not covet, lie, steal, commit adultery, or murder your neighbor. Sounds reasonable, doesn't it? Do not covet, lie, steal, commit adultery, or murder your neighbor. That's the last 5 of the 10 commandments in reverse order. David, king of Israel, broke every one of those in reverse order. That's why I learned it that way. Yes, I don't know. But those are outcome standards. Those have nothing to do with due process. I'm amazed, I'll get to the point. I'm amazed a conservative, well, dadgummit, I'm for the capital punishment. Okay. What about due process? Did these fellows get a fair trial? Did you want to send to the electric chair? The governor of Illinois said he examined the cases of the men in the prisons on death row. He said, I'm in charge here. I'm a separate and co-equal branch of government. I'm not going to execute these fellows until you prove to me that you've fulfilled the requirements of due process. An equal opportunity to be heard, a fair trial, by jury, sequestered, all the things that go with our common law that we don't often talk about. What do they do to him? The feds come blowing in and trumped up charges and sent him to prison for 5 years. That's the kind of things that happen. It's our job to say no, no, no! And if you ain't saying that, all you got to say is no. You don't have to grab your gun and go shoot a bureaucrat. Won't get you anywhere. 10 more will pop up. But we do have to speak the truth in this situation. The law of the city, let me say this, if I would get this out, you're giving me a chance. The law of the city is result-oriented. The law of the land is process-oriented. Like I said, the Bible says, do not fear the face of any man, for the judgment belongs to who? When you're on the jury, the judgment belongs to God. You may deliver your opinion, but understand He's sovereign. He controls everything, even when you don't think He's controlling it. He works with our will. He doesn't cancel our will. That's what our founders believed. I'm just giving you the facts. I read their writings. But the law of the land is process-oriented. Concentrate on being fair. Let the chips fall where they may out here. That's not my business what the outcome is. I follow due process. When I haven't done anything in court for decades except to say, hey, wait a minute, Judge, that ain't fair. And the judge say, oh, I can't figure. I say, Judge, you're getting paid to figure this out and come to a conclusion, not me. I'm here to make sure due process is followed. That's our common law. That's what our common law is. It's called the law of the land. That's a phrase that means due process. God is in charge of the outcome standards. Do not covet, lie, steal, commit adultery, or murder your neighbor.
That's not me. That's his jurisdiction. What jurisdiction did he give to us as mere mortals? Make sure things are done fair. That's what it is. In this case, our common law tradition, as applied in America, in circumstances that are different than any place in the world, we have 50 sovereign governments. 50! And those sovereign governments, like here in Idaho, the legislature has the power to do what you're talking about. I believe. And I believe the Constitution of the United States gives the police powers to the states. What's the police powers? The police powers are the powers that can command future behaviors of men. See, our common law, here's another grand distinction. Our common law does not seek to command the future behaviors of men. What does it do? It fundamentally impanels the jury and says, what happened in the past? You see that? It says, what happened in the past? You tell us, jurymen, what happened? What does the law of the city do? Legislation. Commands. Tries to control future behavior. Regulations, 10,000 pages of the IRS code. Trying to command and control your future behavior. That's God's jurisdiction, not man's. But the federal government doesn't have any police powers within the boundaries of the states. The federal government has police powers only in federal enclaves, such as Washington, D.C., 10 square miles, military bases, federal courthouses. The states are sovereign on their own, and within their own boundaries. Police powers are the powers that pass laws that pertain to health, education, and welfare. States have that authority, health, education, and welfare. The state has authority here to say if you're going to haul dynamite in your truck, you got to get a license and pass a test, and you know how dangerous that stuff is, or nitroglycerin. I'm just giving you some examples. If you have an African lion on your property, you got to do this, 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 and this. That's controlling the future behaviors of men. You understand what I'm saying? That's a power. That's serious, raw power. Legislation tries to do that, but our common law is the opposite. But if the state of Idaho wants to say what you want them to say about taxes, I understand what you're saying. Why should people be able to express their will? That's what a vote is. That's Latin for votary, volition. Why should they be able to do that if they don't have a stake in the outcome? Is that your position?
Yes.
Yes.
That's what the Constitution says. There's an exemption. The legislature can enact the exemption, and they can stop people from voting who don't own property in school elections, indebtedness elections, or irrigation district
Yeah,
elections.
I get it. And beautifully, though, you've got a separate and co-equal branch of government, like all the states. The courts, they aren't bound to what the legislature says if they don't want to be. Now they try to be. The separate branches of government in our common law country try to get along. We call it comity. And you don't just easily defy the other branch. That would create chaos. But there are times, as you know, recently, federal courts, Ninth Circuit and Second Circuit said, this law that Congress passed decades ago that says you can't own a firearm if you're a felon, baloney. The Ninth Circuit said that, and the Second Circuit. It's non-violent. The case in the Ninth Circuit was a gangbanger from L.A. But he wasn't brought up on violent charges at that point, and they ruled against the legislation of Congress that was clear as crystal that said the felon cannot own a firearm. Separate and co-equal branch of government. Division of power. That leaves it up to us to make our own decisions. What do we call that? Freedom. This is our second greatest blessing. I want to make the point to you, don't let it go. How do you learn what the common law is? I've tried to tell you a few things. Common lawyers have struggled with that. I go to the encyclopedias. Let me give you another one. Our common law is organized according to relationship. The law of the city and all the rest of the world is organized according to subject. I have 60 volumes of Amger. Used to come out every year with the updates. Green volumes. Alphabetical order on the bindings. Things like husband, wife, promisor, promisee, debtor, debtee, lendor, lendee, bailor, bailee, invitor, invitee. Everything is about relationships. Law of the city, Code of Justinian, canon civil laws of Rome, admiralty, contracts, family law. Why? Because the law, our common law, its chief purpose is to preserve lawful relationships. Well, you know, the 10 Commandments in the Bible, you can see that. The first 5 commandments are not horizontal, they're vertical. Our relationship with God. The second 5 commandments are horizontal. Our relationship with men. See, there are 2 different relationships there. And the whole Bible plays out that way, by the way. Relationships, not subjects. The Bible is not organized according to subject that way. And neither is our common law. Over and over and over. And there is no end of the fundamental differences, so here's what I'm suggesting. I agree with you, by the way. That was your question.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, I know. Well, I do just because it's the law. Yeah, it's the law. And because we don't know our common law, we don't understand those fundamentals of process, we lose it. We lose our second greatest blessing. Let me tell you one more thing. The outcome standards of our Bible, and I like to say, and repeat it, I hope you can do that. Do not covet, lie, steal, commit adultery, or murder your neighbor. A lot of people do that. Don't do that. It'll ruin your country. It'll pollute our land. It's all about land. And the other thing about our common law is the common law of trusts. The common law of trusts. God's relationship with his people is a trust settlement, and the entrusted property is land. That's what he did to Abraham. I'm going to give you land. Or he did that. Adam, our grandpa, I'm going to give you a land. A bounded land. With a wall around it, the Garden of Eden. What did he do? He polluted it. God threw him out. What did Israel do when they were given the land? They polluted it with idolatry. Visual aids to worship. God threw him out. He did it a couple of times. He does it all over the world. It's our job to not do that. To not worry about the outcome. Worry about the process. It is not the way that I approach my friends, or it's not what I do or don't do, it's how I approach them. When I go to court, I say, Your Honor. Why? Well, because the judge will tolerate all sorts of stupidity. But disrespect, he'll throw you in jail. He has to. The Bible says that. Do not show that disrespect to the man that's in the magistrate. Don't do that. This is God's world and God's government. Go ahead.
What's the process of actually
Wait, whoa,
getting?
I'm sorry, I'll let her go first. I got you. Go ahead. No, that's all right, ma'am. Go ahead. Go ahead, ma'am. Yeah, you.
Me?
Yeah, you.
Oh, yeah, I was starting, okay. What's the actual legal process if you wanted to get land trust?
Oh, land, in other words, entrust land?
Yeah,
Entrust land?
I thought it was actually called land trust.
Well, there's a land trust. There are different kinds of, they're all fundamentally the same, all trusts. But to entrust land, you don't have to do anything. Well, in Idaho, I'm not an Idaho lawyer.
Or anywhere, just the concept.
Well, it's fundamentally the same, but there are differences. For example, in Idaho, to enforce the trust, if you have to go into court, you have to register with the court. I have learned that. But I deal with trusts, and so I know some of them. They're different in every state, but God's relationship with us is a trust settlement. With named beneficiaries, the book of life itself. Land is what God gives everyone. No one can survive without land. Even the people that live on houseboats by the millions in Southeast Asia have to tie up to shore. They can't be on the open ocean forever. And the Bible says that God has divided the land up among the tribes and tongues of the world, and nationhood, not tribalism, nationhood is what God ordains. We have a nation. We're on a land. We're responsible not to pollute it and to take care of it according to His terms. And to understand that we are beneficiaries of His trust settlement of land. And there are 3 certainties in trust law. The Bible expresses them all. 3 certainties of words. Certainty of the entrusted property, certainty of the intent to establish the trust, and certainty of the beneficiaries. and you gotta trust. And if it's a land to be enforceable in America, like a lot of things, it needs to be in writing. But I say that's part of our common law tradition too. A trust are not recognized anywhere in the world except the common law countries. Isn't that something? The Bible establishes the trust for God's people. He does it. And our common law tradition recognizes those things. Somebody said the other day, what's the difference between pardon? Because DJs pardon people. And mitigation. Pardon is an intentional picture of Christianity. You see, pardon is a common law doctrine. It does not exist, again, in the rest of the world. They have a doctrine in Roman law countries, the rest of the world, called kaput. It's not pardon. Pardon, when the president or the governor of your state pardons somebody for state crime, the law says that they are born anew with nothing. They start all over. It is not a declaration of innocence. No. It's just, I'm giving you a new life. I'm taking away the stigma. And you're born, and you come into the world. If you, in common law, if you owned a lot of land or had a title of nobility, you had educational degrees, when the king pardoned you, that stuff is all gone. You start over. That's why Paul the Apostle says you are a new creature. And I count all that stuff, and Paul probably had 2 or 3 doctorate degrees. He was a Pharisee. He was top of the line. He was a yellow-haired boy, killing Christian people, jailing them, stealing their property. Thought he was serving God, he said. But he said, I count all of that, all of those worldly achievements that gave me prestige, I count them as what? That's the nice way to say it. The Greek word is a lot more graphic. Matter of fact, it's so graphic, I wouldn't say it in public. You know, I was growing up, and somebody would read the Bible, and they said the word jackass because it was in the Bible. All the children would start giggling, you know. I would too. He said ass, you know. Well, did you know there's a difference between a jackass and a Jenny ass?
Oh, yeah.
My dad was a teamster, so I learned that kind of stuff. But, no, and the Bible is very specific about when it says Jack and when it says Jenny. Oh, yeah, and it has much meaning. Remember that fellow that was riding Balaam? He was riding Balaam's ass, you know? And he couldn't get the ass to move, and the angel was standing in front of the... Well, that was a Jenny. And I asked my dad, because he knows a lot about horses, and he said, well, that was a winning Jenny. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, I remember when old Lewis was Secretary of State, he was from Marshall. And got up high, you know. And somebody asked him, well, what do you think about your opponent said this and that and the other about you? He said, oh, that guy ain't nothing but a winning Jenny. And I said, well, what did he mean? And Dad said, well, that's a female donkey in heat. And when a female donkey's in heat, she wins a lot. And you can't get her to do anything. She's tired, lazy, and lethargic, and horses the same way. But that's a significant point in that story, see, because he thought that's what she was, and he was beating his Jenny. When the truth is, the angel of the Lord was standing in front of the Jenny with a sword drawn, and the Jenny could see it, and he couldn't. The Jenny was saving his life. Pay attention to your wives, man. You think they're winning Jenny and nagging you? Oh, I think there's big lessons in those kind of stories. Now, you think I'm wrong, you can tell me, but no, I take the Bible pretty raw, and I think that God's speaking to us raw, and He's telling us exactly the way things are, and they ain't going to change. That's right. And the more you look at it, the more you'll see it too. Well, yes.
So I'm trying to wrap my brain around this. This isn't my field, but what I'm hearing, if I could put it in something that I can understand, what you're doing is, the way I understand is differentiating between church and state.
You're asking me to say something about
What
it?
I'm seeing is, when you're talking about civil, we're talking about the state. When we're talking about common law, we're talking about, you said vertical, we're talking about the church. And we have to be careful as to when We have to keep this separation between church and state. And that's why we have this battle with COVID and federal cases that are now turning over because they were infringing, the government was infringing by mandating, they were infringing upon the consciences of people who did not choose to get a vaccination, and now we're having overturning by the federal courts. It's happening. So that's what I'm asking, is this what you're talking about? The separation of church and state?
No, I'm not. Now, let me say what I understand about it. There's a difference between ecclesiocracy and ecclesiocracy would be where a church denomination runs the United States and runs the government. That's what they have in England, an ecclesiocracy. Charlie is the Pope in England. He's the head of the church. Henry VIII didn't change religions, he just made himself head of the church. And he said, well, the Pope doesn't need to be running this country, I'll run this country. That's ecclesiocracy. Ecclesia means, that's the word in the New Testament for, you want to direct me different? Go ahead.
Well, because when you were answering John's question, he was asking a question dealing with a civil case. A civilian life, it's what we do with our laws in a civilian land.
Yeah.
And you correctly said it was actually city.
City law,
Because
yeah.
Boise is operating the state of Idaho, even though we have districts. And yet you went off into common law and saying it's our relationship with God and what we do in our relationship with each other in response to our relationship with God. That's what I saw.
Yeah, well, that's true. But we are not. We are a Christian country,
Yes.
de facto. That does not mean that the Southern Baptist Convention or the Roman Catholic Church runs our government. That's a different matter. But there is a separate, let's go to the First Amendment. If you boil the First Amendment down to religion clauses, the two of them, and if I don't hit the nail with my head, let me know, but I'll just talk and maybe I'll keep talking until I do, or I'll tell you I can't answer the question. The two religion clauses, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion. One. That's called the Establishment Clause. Then it says, nor or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. The first clause says that the government of the United States Congress cannot help any particular sect of religion. That's what it says. That's what it means by what it says. The courts have said that, and they're right. The second one says that Congress cannot hinder any particular sect of religion. Now, keeping those fundamentals in mind, I would say, okay, now how can I apply that to the issue you're presenting? But I have not yet grasped what the issue is that you're presenting.
Okay, like I said, he was dealing with a concrete, resultant experience here, talking about voting.
Yeah,
Okay, and it's something that we deal with in our everyday life.
right.
Okay, and your answer was very ethereal.
Ethereal?
Yes,
I agree with it.
yes.
Okay.
When you came down to it, but again, then what you were doing was submitting to the rule of law in this state, given by the Supreme Court of the state of Idaho, the legislature. So that's what I'm saying is.
Can I refine the question the way I'm thinking of it? It's kind of like what John brought up and what you're bringing up. This is a dilemma for me, okay? I mean, the question to you. So, common law is more about the process. And the people adversarially work that out. But the civil law always comes up with statutes and codes and regulations and stuff to control things. Those are two different systems, right? So it seems to me we've got the common law foundation, but we function as a civil law manner. Because what they were doing, they're passing codes and statutes and regulations to regulate everything, and that's what we're fed. How do you, so my question is, how do we activate common law remedies when they're acting all with civil law procedures that we're stuck under that?
That's my question.
We're stuck under that. How do we reassert the common law to overcome that becoming dominant over our lives? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, it reminds me, tell me if I'm hitting the nail with my head. As I said, Mussolini said, I want these men tried, that's due process, and shot. That's result-oriented government. And he did that, and so did Hitler, and so did the Emperor of Japan, and so do people all over the world today. The process is what we have to demand. That's our jurisdiction. Like I said, I've never gone to court and said anything, but that ain't fair, Judge. That's all I've ever said when you boil it all down. We said that a lot, didn't we? We said that. We still say it. And there are processes, not results, that are available to all of us, and we're not using them. I went to Lovelock, Nevada. I stopped at the courthouse doing business there for mining claims 10, 15 years ago. I went to the courthouse there, is round. The courtroom in the center is round. Push the seats down, pull the seats up, and there's a place there to put your cowboy in, and you put it down. The jury box is in the center of the courtroom. You can't even whisper to your client without the jury hearing what you're saying. The acoustics are so designed so the jury hears everything in the room. I went and asked the prosecutor, because he came out, not just talking. I said, when's the last time you had a jury trial? Here. He said, 2 years ago. We're not having jury trials. We need to be going to court. Our remit, common law, is about private law. It's not about government law. It's about private parties. You know, you got a problem, your neighbor's got a hog lot, and the manure's running down on you. What's your remedy? In Idaho, I'll tell you what everybody would do, they call the sheriff. The sheriff would call the bureaucrat. The bureaucrat would come out and try to find the fellow. What does the common law say? Say, sue him, take him to court. You got a remedy, you can get money. You turn it over to the government, you don't get nothing. They just get bigger and more powerful. It comes down, I don't know again if I'm touching your concern, but it comes down to, friends, this thing in the Bible where the people say the Bible says you're not to sue your Christian brother, that's false. That's not what it says. It says impanel courts and do it yourself, is what it says, 1 Corinthians chapter 6. And choose the least esteemed among you, 12 guys just standing around. Ask the poor man who is esteemed to stand in judgment on the property of the rich man who just got sued. See how that works? You know what that would do and what it does do. I know trial lawyers in small towns. You know what trial lawyers do in small towns? They're careful never to offend anybody. Because somebody might be on the jury and be mad at them for the case. And if we ask the least esteemed among us to make those decisions in court, as jury members, we'll all be a lot nicer to the least esteemed, won't we? Because they may stand in judgment on our property someday. The Bible's a beautiful book, and the standards are wonderful. And all the concerns of all the people that think that the world rough and mean and dirty and low, no, God's law is merciful, as David says, more than anything we can come up with ourselves. But I don't know, again, I'm still unclear on what she asked. Did I touch something and give you some satisfaction or something to think about? I can only tell you what's on the top of my consciousness. If not, come to me later and I maybe don't understand.
Thank you.
Yes.
You mentioned two differences between the city law and common law. I got the cross-examination as one.
Yep.
What was the other?
The jury, a 12-man jury. Our common law is process-oriented, not outcome-oriented, like Mussolini. And there are, I think in that book we got back there on comparative law, I think I've got something like a list of 30 clear differences at the fundamental level. You know, people say to me, well, the common law is just like the
civil law, it's against the law to commit murder. Well, it is, but who is the lawgiver? Who do you offend when you commit murder in a Christian de facto country? The state of Idaho? You commit murder in a law of the city country, it's a personal offense against the emperor, the empress, the sovereign. That's not true. We are a country, a common law country, where here's another difference. We're a country of not men, but of what? Law. What were we worried about when DJ Trump won the election in 2020? What were people saying the problem was?
Election was stolen.
What?
Election was stolen.
Yeah, it was. And it all came down to not who was to be president. It came down to, was the process followed? Right? We should have been complaining, and we did. Hey, we didn't follow the process of election law. That's why this happened. We're not arguing, we may have want Donald to be president, but us mere mortals are to be concerned about the process. God's in control of the outcome. Any more comments?
I want to ask you to do one more thing here for a minute, but seems to me like the $1 million problem or question to solve is how to get out from under this regulative state that we got that's become so big. But it seems to me the first part of the answer has to be we have to understand the common law foundation for what it should be. Because if we don't understand that, we don't know what to get, we might know what we want to get away from, but we don't know what to get back to. Does that make sense? Okay, so we're at the end of time. We usually cut off after 2 hours. So thank you very much for coming. I'd like for you to just let them know what you have back there at your table and what you're offering, like you said last night. We got it.
Book, the Declaration of 76 and the Constitution of the United States, clause by clause and blow by blow. You can have the old copy, which has mistakes in it, but it has the substance in it for $3 a copy. I gotta get rid of it. I've had it for years. I've got about twice as thick, clause by clause and blow by blow, what it says, what it means by what it says. And you can pay more for that and it costs more to print it. Then also, the book that Steve's been talking about, Excellence of the Common Law, Comparative Law Text, 958 pages. Comparing and contrasting the law of the land, our common law, with the law of the city on every continent and in every age, beginning at the founding of the city of Babylon over 4,000 years ago, and then bringing it up to the present, using historical sources to make the arguments. And through that, it's just constant, comparing and contrasting. You cannot know our common law. Common lawyers have said for centuries. Fortescue in the 14th century, you cannot know our common law unless you compare it and contrast it with this great antagonist, the law of the city. The law of the city is fundamentally martial law. You go into the big cities and you're not going to have the freedoms you have here. Because they say, oh, we're all crowded up together, we've got to give up our rights to get along. And what does God say? Be fruitful, multiply, and do what? Spread out. And God says he will destroy every city on the faces of the earth. Read the book of Revelation. He's going to destroy them all. You know what else he's going to do? This is fascinating. There will be no more seas. If there are no more seas, there is no more what kind of law? Admiralty. Oh, the Bible is beautiful. But he wants us to live now under his law. You got a different lawgiver, you got a different law, you got a different standard, and you're going to be hated by the people that reject that. They're going to try to throw you in prison. That doesn't sound too enjoyable, does it? No, but there's a great joy in doing what's right. I'll tell you that. Well, yeah, those books back there. Also, what people call the winterized version of the Bible. A common lawyer translates and annotates the Bible from the original tongues. 35,000 footnotes explaining why I translate the way I do. I call it toward a raw translation of the Bible. I don't want to cook the book. You can get that. The target audience of that Bible, that translation, different than any other translation, is me. I translated it for myself, so I have notes and translation when I teach. But it's available to other people. Some people want it. It's available back there. Also, the law school courses. We teach law school courses on the internet. Sheriff Darleaf and I, Sheriff from Berry County, Michigan. And we're teaching a class now. We're in the third of about a dozen. They're all in the can. You can still go get them. Contracts, evidence, and common law. All common law courses. Now, this one is Christian nationhood. What does that mean? Is that possible? Are we a Christian nation? Should we be? Answering those kinds of questions. We're teaching that course now. When you take the courses and you make a donation, we want to give you something for it. So you're making a donation, we're giving to you something in appreciation, and that keeps us going. And I'm not practicing law the way I used to. I'm 70 years old. I'm tired. I keep talking, but I'm tired in other ways. And I would ask that you would support us if you think there's anything worthwhile here. I believe, like John Wycliffe did. You know, John Wycliffe is known for translating the Bible into English for the first time. You've heard of it. But he didn't translate from the original tongues because he did not have the original tongues manuscripts. He translated from the Latin Vulgate of Jerome. But we had it in English. What's not said about John Wycliffe is, he said this: we got to do two things to save our country. We got to get the Bible in English, so the boy behind the plow, walking behind the plow, can read it. Number two, we got to get common law to be taught in Oxford. See, all the universities are products of the Roman papacy. They began in Rome in order to promote the law of the city, the code of Justinian, as the Logos. That's what they said, the Logos. Who's the Logos?
Christ.
In the beginning was the Logos, the word, yeah. Well, they said, no, this is the Logos. This is the pinnacle of human reason. The worship of the mind of the man. Forget the facts. We're smart. Well, anyway, that's more of that. You can get those kind of books and listen to us. We're on the radio 7 days a week. Go to the website, commonlawyer.com, and you can find all those things. commonlawyer.com. Thank you very much.
Yeah, my friend.